This time me name is Poopa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Poopa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Review, where we make sense of the news, the only news review talk show in the country. And I will bragging about it at the Choice Center myself because it looked like I'm not centered. But anyways, make a left Alexi Belial, who is the technical director, for handle that. Yes, so I'm Sister YaYa, Marin Coleman, producer and host of the only news review talk show in the country, where we make sense of the news. And since 2025 started, we have our dynamic revolutionary brother, Mutota from the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago. And we have guests, look at her, really double up today, you know, because we got somebody from Trinidad and somebody from Tobago. And so we have historian Sister Doc Rita Pembroke. Pemberton. But there's a place at Tobago named Pembroke, not true?
Pembroke, yes.
Yes, that was part to get the piece there mixed up. Pemberton, Sister Doc Pemberton and Brother Mutota co-host. Good morning, Brother Akka. Good morning, Sister Doc.
Good morning.
Rita Pemberton.
Morning, Sister YaYa. Morning, Sister YaYa. Morning to our listening audience, and it's a pleasure to be on this program with Dr. Rita Pemberton from Tobago.
Sister Doc, how are you being this morning?
I am fine, thank you. I want to say thank you for inviting me to be in this distinguished forum this morning. Yes, I am pleased. I'm glad that people are interested in history.
Well, we know we just had August 1st in the English-speaking territories is recognized as African People's Emancipation Day. So, Brother Akka and me made a talk, and we said, listen, we really have to spend time talking about it. And then they tell me about the commentary article we write in on Newsday. And I said, well, the law did not emancipate Africans in Tobago. I said, well, no. On African Emancipation Day, Sister Doc, I tell people, Tobagonians were not emancipated. So we're going to get into that conversation with Sister Doc Rita Pemberton. As soon as Brother Akka done update with on the Caribbean news, and we have news from 5 countries. I don't know if we can get through all of them. Jamaica, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and Barbados. And the whole year, we're focusing on Caribbean people and Caribbean news because we're all connected and we need to know what happened with one another. Go to strong, Brother Akka.
Again, good morning, Sister YaYa, Dr. Pemberton, and to our listening audience. This morning, the first headline I'm going to deal with is out of Grenada. And it's a very important article for the Caribbean because even though it emerges out of Grenada, it applies to the entire Caribbean given our situation. And I won't be able to read the entire article because it is a bit long, but I would read parts of it so that people can understand the gist of the article. So the headline is "The Price of Being Young in Grenada and the Caribbean." And it begins with a deep dive into youth displacement, crime, and the erosion of hope and the urgency for evidence-based responses in Grenada and beyond. The introduction says, beyond the glossy postcards of white sandy beaches and lush rainforests lies a crisis that can no longer be ignored across the Caribbean and Grenada, the OECS. Youth are no longer simply surviving, they are sinking, casualties of a system that has failed to invest in their future. The promise of education, work, and ownership the fundamental pillars of development that our parents and school teachers told us back in the 1970s and 80s has crumbled for too many. In place of opportunity, they face unemployment, undereducation, poverty, and a growing allure of crime. This was one of the fundamental reasons why the Grenada transformation agenda was so popular among Grenadians, particularly our youth and university graduates. This quiet emergency is now erupting in waves of youth violence, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and brutal acts that shock not just the local conscience, but the world. One such case was that of Ron Mitchell, 30, Atiba Stanislaus, 27, and Trevor Robertson, 21. Three young men from Paradise St. Andrews, Grenada, convicted on July 30th, 2025 for the chilling 2024 murders of two American tourists. They were sentenced to a combined over 276 years in prison. The men had previously been arrested for a series of violent crimes, including rape and armed robbery. They were fugitives from police custody when they hijacked the couple's yacht, bound and gagged them, and left them to perish at sea. However, while the heinousness of the crime made global headlines, few paused to ask, how did we get there? Oblivion, nor did they appear from shadows of society. They were always among us, along with the circumstances which birthed them. These men came from a fractured socioeconomic landscape of Grenada, which has become the breeding ground for disenfranchisement and destruction. Consider the following statistics for Grenada. 1. Grenada's youth unemployment rate, ages 15 to 29, stands at 36.8%, more than triple the adult average and among the highest in the OCS, according to the Caribbean Development Bank. Number 2, over 43% of Grenadian youth under 30 are either unemployed, underemployed, or not in education or training. Number 3, only 15% of secondary school leavers enrolled in formal technical and vocational education and training, compared to 30% in St. Vincent and 35% in Barbados. Number 4, more than 88% of youth under 36 do not own property or land, with less than 1 in 10 qualifying for mortgages due to low income, unstable employment, or lack of collateral. Number 5, firearm-related arrests involving youth in Grenada have more than doubled between 2019 and 2024, with over 60% of gun crimes committed by individuals aged 16 to 29. And 6, Grenada has one of the highest rates of incest in the OECS territories. 7, 70% of drug-related arrests in Grenada involve youth under 30, according to the Caribbean community. These numbers paint a devastating picture. The youth are not drifting towards crime, they are being systematically abandoned to it. The absence of responsive, well-structured, and joined-up national development policies, such as active labor market policies, decent work programs, youth housing, entrepreneurship schemes, and accessible lending facilities, employment schemes, as well as health and well-being programs, along with civic engagement processes, has left a vacuum now increasingly filled by gangs, guns, drug trafficking, and underground economies. These crimes are not just the failure of 3 individuals. They were the failure of 3 generations of governance that ignored the youth until they became statistics or headline. It is time to confront the deeper sickness. When a country fails to invest in its young people, it inevitably pays multiple times in blood, trauma, and lost futures. The true cost of youth crime, death, incarceration, and marginalization is far greater than we care to admit. Every life lost to crime is not just a personal tragedy, but a permanent loss of talent, leadership, and potential that our regional communities need so desperately. Further, losing our youth today is a travesty on our future diminished opportunities, reduced workforce, and weakened society. The effects of the loss of our youth and the impact of their crimes cannot be isolated and bottled up, but instead have a real spillover effect into society which transcends time. The tragedy of these murders lies not in what happened to the victims, but in the dangerous normalization of youth despair that is allowed to happen in Grenada and the Caribbean region. And so the article goes on, but this is what I want, where I want to stop. Because as you have recognized on this show, a lot of times when we read the news, whether it's in Lucia, Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, it is the same thing: violence, gun crime, murder, and so on. And this sort of puts into perspective the Grenada situation, and what has happened to these three young men who have been sentenced to over 276 years in prison for crimes that they committed. So that is the first article on Grenada. The second one would be on Jamaica, and this is possibly will be a little more what you may call positive, but not too much. But this issue of crime in the Caribbean is a very, very serious issue. And as I said, it's not so much positive, this article, but it's a sort of wake-up call for the Caribbean. It has to do with the fact that there is an upcoming election in Jamaica. And this commentator is calling for the political parties to be responsible. So the headline is, "Political Commentator Urges JLP PNP to tone down irresponsible rhetoric." And it begins by saying, "There ought to be an effort to get both leaders along with their general secretaries at some point sitting around a table and coming up with some basic agreements, a kind of truce, so to speak, as to the way forward." The commentator contends that political tensions have increased as opposed to the last two elections because the bases of the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National equally charged up. In the last two elections, to some extent, the PNP was not as. In 2020, thousands of comrades stayed away from the polls for a number of reasons. And in the 2016 election, there was a tremendous amount of disunity as well as disenchantment. The commentator noted too that the stakes are high for both parties and stressed concern that this election could turn violence. He pointed to the recent incident in central Kingston, where a member of Parliament, Donovan Williams, and his campaign team were reportedly shot at while mounting campaign paraphernalia. He emphasized that although the police have yet to present evidence that the attack was politically motivated, there have been insinuations from the JLP suggesting that is the case. The commentator said while party leaders have a responsibility to send the right signals to followers about how they should behave, their candidates are equally obligated. The type of candidates are being put forward in some of these constituencies, the men and women, are not of a certain stature in terms of how they relate to their followers. And very often, in their bid to acquire power, they pander to them and allow them to become volatile and irresponsible in terms of how they behave out there. He called on the JLP and the PNP to implement guidelines for candidate conduct in an election. Candidates have a responsibility also to keep their campaigns in a sober and responsible manner. And this is important because we just came out of an elections in Trinidad, and our fault line, if you want to call it that, our fracture is the ethnic consideration, Indians and Africans. And every time an election comes up, these fault lines emerge and politicians seek to exacerbate them. And so we have problems and tensions in the society. And in Jamaica, it is different. It is class, and in some instances, caste. And what the commentator said to me in an interview I did this morning, colorism. So the commentator is calling for more responsible and sober rhetoric. And this applies to the entire Caribbean. Every election, we have some issue which the politicians in their inadequacies cannot address. So they resort to emotional and responses to the population, appealing to the emotional and their base instincts, and that is something we have to cease doing in the wider Caribbean. So I'll move on to the next article, which is from the island of St. Vincent, should be St. Vincent. But these issues I mentioned apply to the entire Caribbean, whether it is Trinidad or Grenada or Barbados, and we need to do better in the Caribbean relative to how we conduct our elections campaign. In fact, on the interview this morning, I indicated that as part of the political system is the inadequate nature of the political system. And as a result, we have some of the worst people assuming or being placed in leadership of these political parties and sometimes as candidates. And so that is part of what we are dealing with. And my suggestion is that we take a hard look at how we change our political system. Before I go into the next article, there's an article I think was very important, which has to be read. I think I didn't put it in the list, Society, but I think it's important, especially in the light of the crime situation in the Caribbean. And it's a report from ECLAC, the Economic Commission of Latin America, which I think, if people understand it, it is at the root of the problem in the Caribbean. And what it says here is that Latin America and the Caribbean endures a prolonged period of low growth. And we will only grow in 2025, 2.2%, and in 2026, 2.3%, right? And one of the things that I've always said is that you cannot measure growth only by statistics, and this is what we have a tendency to do. You know, there is a famous line that a cricket commentator used. He said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, which means that statistics are not always reflective of growth or progress. And so what ECLAC is saying here is that the forecast for the Caribbean and Latin America in terms of economic growth for 2020 and 2025 is not very good. Even though it says that the new projection will represent a slight upward provision, it is not enough, right? And it goes on to make recommendations as to what should be done. And one of the issues is, how do we address youth entrepreneurship? How do we address the issue of lending and financing for entrepreneurs? So a large part of what we are seeing manifest as crime, in my opinion, has to do with either inadequate policies or failed policies. And so this is the gist of the report from the Economic Commission for Latin America. So I will move on to the next article.
Time check is 10 minutes to 11.
How much more time I have?
Say 5 minutes so we could give Sister Doc a moment to introduce herself.
So I will possibly read one more, and then we'll call it a day. So,
where will that story come from?
Well, this story is actually from Antigua, right? And it's a very interesting story for the Caribbean. And the headline is, Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown to lead Caribbean voice at 2025 Clinton Global Initiative Summit. Gaston Brown has a dubious history. And a lot of people may be familiar with what's happening with the people of Barbuda, where he used the hurricane as a means to displace the people from their traditional lands. And also, what is disturbing with this is the Bill Clinton, more than any president in the last, I would say, 30, 40 years, has been single-handedly responsible for derailing and undermining the people of Haiti, by especially with the thing he did when he basically destroyed the Haitian rice industry to sell rice from Arkansas to Haiti. So I'll read the article. Former US President Bill Clinton has issued a stark warning to the global community, calling for urgent united action to confront an unprecedented set of global challenges. Speaking ahead of the 20th anniversary of the Clinton Global Initiative, he declared that the 2025 summit will be different by necessity. The global development community is at an unprecedented crossroads with growing humanitarian needs, fewer resources, and the landscape changing every day. We need to redefine how we show up, how we work, and how we define ways to honor our common heritage. And it is so ironic, this coming from Bill Clinton, who has, when he had the situation with Monica Lewinsky, decided to start a war in Yugoslavia as a distraction, away from his own political problems. So this is not an individual that, in my opinion, any Caribbean leader should be associated with, given his history with Haiti and given his other kinds of history in terms of sacrificing people. Two people I know, one was Sister Soldier, who I knew very well, the rapper, who he used to bolster his right-wing credentials. And the other was Olani Guinea, who wrote the book Tyranny of the Majority, which was a whole different legal thesis. And when the right wing attacked her, Clinton, who was supposed to be her friend, he basically abandoned her. And so this is not an individual that Caribbean leaders should be in any way associated with, in my opinion. So I'll end on that note, Sister YaYa, so that we can give more time to our sister, Dr. Rita Pemberton.
Big thanks, Brother Akko. So we had time today for Caribbean news stories from Jamaica, Grenada, Antigua, and a report from the Economic Commission of Latin America, ECLA. Good work as usual, Brother Akko. Sister Doc Rita Pemberton, historian, Tobagonian. Tell me what I want to know about you, because most
Tobagonian.
I stand corrected. Tobagonian. Tobagonian. I stand corrected. Tell me what I want to know about you before we got a break, because most of we will know who you are, your calling, and how long you're dedicated to the work we're to do.
I am a historian, Caribbean historian. I look at history of health, history of environment, but I look mostly at people history. That is, their interface with the environment, their relationship with the administration in which they found themselves. So I have written on the environment, I've written on health, and my last contribution was I worked at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus, teaching history, imperialism included, history of the Caribbean. And so having done that, my last publication, which was earlier this year in June, those of us who worked with her, Professor Breddah, she was the head of the department for quite a while. And so we decided that since she's retired, that we would do a fresh script in her honor. So I contributed to that in the editor as a joint editor, and I wrote an article on Tobago in that collection. So that is me. I other than that, what have I done? I used to play sports when I was on campus and in school and stuff, netball and basketball. I still like them. I still wish I could play, but other forces have worked against me. So now I am a devoted historian, particularly to the history of Tobago, and that is what is the genesis of the article you would have seen. I do a column every week in the Newsday. Yes.
Now, what made you think of that title? I mean, the African Emancipation Day, and you want to write one title where say, the law did not emancipate Africans in Tobago. People are like, so why would you celebrate August 1st then?
No. But truth has to be told. And it is called emancipation. And when you hear the word, you expect some kind of liberty. But emancipation on the 1st of August was celebrated. A governor makes an announcement to the population saying you must thank the Lord and thank the British people and thank your owners, your administrators on the island. Really? But what were they doing? They were resisting. They were fighting for their emancipation. And it was a factor in the process. However, the whole idea of emancipation did not reach the minds and owners of plantations in a receptive manner. They were resisting. And then the British government was interested in another kind of economic activity. It was going wide. In the industrial Britain needed wide markets. The Caribbean slave markets were too narrow. They couldn't buy anything. They couldn't buy much. And you have all these industrial goods. You want to go where the populations are larger and where they could afford more. So you want to do that. But you do not want to be accused of dismantling a Caribbean society that in some territories was financially solid. Trinidad, Guyana, unlike those ones like Tobago and St. Vincent, So you don't want to rock that boat, but you want to push ahead. So you come up with this formula because you're under pressure. You're under pressure from the resisting enslaved people, Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, and they didn't like the bubble. They figured it would ripple all over. So they have to find some means of doing that. Besides which, resistance of any kind was costly because they had to pay soldiers to come and keep order and curb. So we want to deal with that. And then you sit and discuss this, how you're going to liberate, because you have the pressure coming also from the humanitarian side, the anti-slavery society. So you have the anti-slavery, you have your desire not to disrupt a society that has been organized in a way that is satisfactory to you and them. And you have the industrial push, and that is your economy is growing and you want money. So you have to sort of find your way through these three contending forces. So what do? You come up with emancipation because the pressure is there. The British public has become endeared to this notion of these horrible people. What are they doing to them? You're sorry for these fellows, so we will liberate them. We'll free them. So we have an Emancipation Act.
One sec. We'll pause there. We'll take a break. But no, I don't have the framing, right? And I thought this was different. What do you think, Brother Akko, of those three positions? Because usually when you hear about African emancipation, there are always like the European people, the anti-slavery people, the religious people that I'm concerned about. So we don't usually hear the other 2 points, especially how involved African people have been in resisting for their own emancipation. You oftentimes don't hear that story. So I'm going to give Brother Akko quickly. Brother Akko, you have a minute, and then we're going to break. It's not on.
Yeah. So, yes. So the key thing for me, why I wanted to have Dr. Pemberton on, because she interrogated history in a different way. We have this tendency to look at the celebratory aspects and the 1834 and always on the merriment and so on. But because she had a different perspective, because she looked at it differently, that's why I think it's important, because this is how we are going to learn to utilize our history in what I call as a living legacy, and not just as a historical relic, if I may use that term. So she began to question and dissect, what does this emancipation mean? And I've always said that emancipation is a stage. The act was one part of it, but we have to evolve. And the evolution is towards our liberation, in which we free ourselves from all the colonial residues and all that kind of thing. And to answer your question directly about the the role, too many times the role of the oppressor is highlighted in the emancipation narrative and less the role of resistance. And that is because they want the narrative of the good European to prevail and not the narrative of resistance, because that is a nightmare, given what happened in Haiti to the enslavers. So we have to, this is why I said part of the responsibility, right, which she did is interrogate history in a different way, and also to deconstruct our own history, right, and to reconstruct narratives that serve our purpose. So I am very happy that she did that article, and when I read it, I said to you, we had to get her on the show.
Indeed. So on stay tuned, Sister Dr. Rita Pemberton, historian from Tobago, will come back. I really, calling on people and share the link to get one different interpretation other than the European and people are deeply colonized in their mind interpretation, and why UEF keeps stress that African People's Emancipation Day is not about bashment and merriment and politicians that pose up and take a picture. This is about learning the truth about our African ancestors and ancestors, learn from their strengths, their weaknesses, and do better so we could have a better quality of life, because only the people and save the people. Break time.
Okay.
Make every moment matter with your credit card. More transactions, more chances to win cash back. You can be one of 4 monthly winners. Get a chance to win cash back with every purchase of $100 or more. For more information, visit www.atlabank.com. Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
On July 10th, 2025, Belize Electricity Limited and Blair Atoll Power Company Limited signed a historic power purchase agreement for the development of a 15-megawatt utility-scale solar plant, complete with a 1.5 megawatt, 3 megawatt-hour battery storage system. This project represents a significant milestone in building a cleaner, more sustainable, and resilient electricity grid.
Today's signing is the furthest we have ever come down the road of realizing the needed facilities and our own ambitions for harnessing the power of the sun. This PPA provides a model in which everybody, BEL, Babcock, and consumers win, and that is how it should be. We have every confidence that Babcock can and will bring this project home, and BEL publicly offers whatever support it can to realize this goal.
What we learn here will set the foundation for future projects, including solar, wind, hybrid systems, and even other emerging developing technologies, renewable energy technologies, that Belize will need if we are going to remain competitive and resilient.
BEL and Babcock will collaborate closely to develop and commission the plant within 12 to 18 months from the start of construction. Once operational, the solar plant will supply clean, renewable energy directly to the national grid, strengthening Belize's energy security and diversifying our national energy mix.
Oh man, one more scroll and my data is done.
Wait, who said anything about running out? Smart just dropped a more powerful plan that now includes social media data, so you can scroll till your fingers cramp. Visit any Smart showroom to sign up today because connectivity just got even better. Smart, bringing people together.
The hurricane season is here. Are you prepared? Get the essentials you need to stay safe this hurricane season, such as plywood, tarp and rope, first aid kit, rubber boots, raincoats and rain ponchos, generator, portable radio and batteries, flashlight and kerosene lanterns. Weather the storm with these products and more from Benny's. Quality and savings.
Guatemala. This time we we have figure. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This after we that fear. Nobody give it to nobody.
Welcome back to Sunday Review, where we make sense of the news. I'm Sister YaYa, Brother Akka co-host, and our guest this morning is historian Tobagonian, Sister Doc Rita Pemberton. Before we got on a break, she was giving us for a lot of it, the first time we hear what it is that pushed the British to agreeing to the emancipation of African enslaved people who were considered property chattel. And run that three things by way again, and then continue to tell me the rest of the story, Sister Doc. That pushed the British to officially declaring as a law the ending of chattel enslavement of enslaved African people in their territories.
They were under pressure. They were under pressure from two forces. One, the enslaved population had begun to be more agitated, and there were greater instances of rebellion, stimulated, of course, by the grand example from Haiti. And so you had Barbados, you had Jamaica, you had Guyana, and they were big. So there was a fear that that would disrupt the entire society. It would be very costly. That's one. Two, the humanitarian element, the anti-slavery society was gaining ground, was influencing people in Parliament. The whole Parliament that had been constituted with what was called the West Indian interest was now changed, and it was being infiltrated by the business interest, the industrialists, and they did not want, they wanted free trade. The Navigation Acts had forced the business world to trade with the Caribbean. Everything from the Caribbean had to come to England, and it was Caribbean first. But now you have an industry and you're producing so much. The Caribbean markets were too narrow. most of them impoverished, like Tobago or St. Vincent. They couldn't buy much, and therefore you wanted, as an industrialist, so your policies and the policies you would support moving that way. So the British government had to sort of balance its way, resisting enslave, a humanitarian element that is pointing to the negatives of the slave experience, and the industrialists who are gaining influence and making more money. And that's what the British wanted, more money. And you had to balance these off. So you had to come to an agreement about the settlement of the question in the Caribbean, because that was costly. The settlement of that was in a discussion with planter interests and the British government, and there was no representation for the enslaved population. So they come up with a compensation. We have to compensate planters. And so, all right, so we will give them emancipation, but we'll compensate them because when they get the emancipation, they've lost their possessions, right? So the fellas still weren't happy with that. So they argued for more. So the British government was paying 20 million pounds to be distributed across the region. But then the planters argued, and they came up with an apprenticeship system. So the act was in 1834. And it was this apprenticeship was supposed to operate for 4 to 6 years. 4 years for those that were most civilized. That is, those ones who, it was said, had greater exposure to white civilization. And so those would be the domestic workers and the skilled workers. But the unskilled, those who work in the fields, they remain crude, ignorant, savage. So they need a longer period. Now, in this apprenticeship, what do you understand by apprenticeship in the first instance? Somebody is training somebody. But it didn't happen. There was no training. You were working with the same people who objected to you being free, who were steeped into a slave culture. There was no system for them to be cured of their obsession with slavery, you know? So there's no disabuse of that thinking of inferiority and this is my possession. In fact, the governor's address to the enslaved population in Tobago said just that they are no longer you are free, but you have to be trained to be free and take care of yourself. So we train in this period of the apprenticeship, and you are apprenticed to the same oppressive people. So I don't see any freedom there, right? And then, so you have to give your labor free. So you are paying part of the compensation to the planters. So you, with your labor, your free labor for the 4 or 6 years, well, in the end, they had to free everybody at the same time in 1838. But your labor was part of the compensation to planters, right? So where's the liberation? And then when you are free, when it comes to an end now, you are working in the same place for the same people, and they have not been freed from their perception of you and what your role must be. Where's the freedom? But there are clear in the minds. You must not be allowed to have any independent activity. You must remain dependent on the plantations. And the way to do that is because they sensed that the enslaved Africans wanted land. So there's a policy of preventing them from getting land, making it difficult to buy, making it expensive, selling parcels of land that they did not own, giving people land and no receipts, so no title. So you have a history of the island of poor land titles. That has come down to this day. Real problems. So where is the freedom?
That's valid. Before you took this position, did you hear anyone with this perspective? Because I would have heard that we're not free because we're mentally enslaved, but I've never heard it from the perspective that you shared it. So are you the person with this original thought, or have you heard others maybe explore it but not gone as in depth as you have gone?
No, it was taught. It was taught that this was Emancipation Day, was Liberation Day, and there were celebrations. There were celebrations, but part of the history of enslaved people is that their activities were always twofold. A celebration was at the same time a resistance movement, because their celebrations were couched on their experiences and their sense of what is a baptism and what is a wedding. So that is when they said, this is me, this is us, this is we. Our identity is pushed forward at that point in time. So as we are celebrating, we are resisting. And what happens now with our celebrations is that combined role is not sufficiently, to my mind, amplified. So we have marches. We have a big march in Port of Spain going from the city center up to the Queen's Park, and then there are booths and there are sales and there are all kinds of activities. Fine, that shows us. But what after that day? What is there? And that is my concern, that you dress up and you wear African clothes, and the businessmen make money selling, well, African clothes or clothes with African print. Most of them are Chinese anyhow, and so where are we going? I think we need to give deeper thought to the whole exercise, and we can celebrate our emancipation by becoming more emancipated. So the mental thing, is what we are bounded by systems. We've had a legal system that is imported. We have an education system that is imported and not suitable. We have growing, as mentioned in the news just now, growing violence of the young people. Is it a social problem? Is it a medical problem? Or a combination of them? What are we doing about it? I mean, we can't just sit and throw our hands in the air and say, well, we'll throw them in jail or we'll throw them out of school. That doesn't resolve the problem. And it is region-wide, which suggests to me that there's something inherently wrong in what we have been doing, even the measures we have taken to say we are treating with. If it's in school, you suspend, that does nothing. So you send me home, and I go home and sleep. But have you dealt with what it is in their heads cause that issue to become so widespread across the region? Is it in the things we are eating, the food with all the additives? All these kinds of matters must be taken into consideration. But what I'm seeing, though, is that remained, and Bob Marley says it, and Marcus Garvey said it, and, we have to decolonize the mind. We have been nurtured in a sense of inferiority. We are at the bottom, black. Everything black is primitive, and everything is white is good and best for you. So you aspire to be white. The colorism issue that comes in. So the white people used the community they created by violence, in most cases, the brown people, to give them a little more privilege. So you could move up the social ladder a little bit because of your color. But as a black person, you want to be white. We do it all the time. We do our face color. We put on stuff to make us look lighter. We eat white stuff. Our food. I was at a gathering, and this lady was talking about her mother had been cooking, and the Anglican priest came to visit the house, and the mother ran to hide the food. And he was a very nosy man. He smelled the food from the time he came. He said, I want some of that. but it was, like swordfish and provision. And we move up. When we move up, we have macaroni pie. So I would ask, what tree produces macaroni? I mean, it is better food for you. That's what it's thought. Macaroni pie. So it's just a part of the Sunday, this macaroni pie, macaroni and cheese. I said, but we don't grow any of that stuff. Well, if what's wrong with your breadfruit or whatever, So those are the kinds of issues that we need to take a second and third look at, because the colonization has made us think in particular ways. Your language is bad. You must speak. I mean, it was so funny. It was going to school, it was the Queen's English. When you went home, you had to demonstrate that you're going to secondary school, so you had to speak properly. And properly meant that you must not hang on to those things that your grandmother would say. And now, that is what is so very important. What your grandmother used to tell you, what came from Africa to the Caribbean in terms of our language, and some very, very inspirational kinds of expressions. I went to a gathering and I said, all right, so if you're cooking with my mother in the house and you're making cake. So when I went to secondary school, the first thing they did, we had to do homework. Everybody had to do homework, so you have a measuring cup. But in my house, we didn't have any measuring cup. We had an old tin cup. So 1 cup of my tin cup and 1 cup of your measuring cup is not the same. Anyway, so my mother will come and we mix this thing, and then she'll say, it wants a Now, how do you spell And was told, it was verbalized, but it was also demonstrated, because this is a So a could be this much, or it could be the length of the joint. So a more. Now, I love because nobody could spell it. But it was indigenous measurements, right? And so they had ways of doing their things. And the other one was grandmother discipline. Your grandmother gave vex. She give you eyes, right? So the response is not only verbal. She will give you some words too, but it was, and then when you get that look, you're in trouble. So we need all those things back to bring people back in line, because that is what kept the society. The older men will tell you when their grandmother talk, nobody back. You just have to do what you have to do. And so discipline was brought in like that. And then there's a tradition where, I'm sure they were in other islands too, that part of the resistance to the planters was to send the boys to trade, to get a vocation, because that paid more. So everybody had a vocation, a skill, in addition to wherever they work. So they always had two things. Right now, our young population has been forced into that, because you go and you are a lawyer, and when you come out, you can't get a job. So you might have to work as a clerk, or you might have to use your skills on the computer. Or, as you see some of them doing, you set up a business making cakes or making something. So they're doing that now, but it should be built into our system of education and training, that people do not, we don't have these closed notions that when I grew up, I want to be a doctor, and a doctor would make a lot of money, I will get rich and live happily ever after. It doesn't work like that. So you could be a doctor, yes, but you could be doing other things. I mean, there are doctors who have services organized in places for people decorating, You can do, but you should have one more skill. You should have a skill. You should be able to make your clothes or cook your food, properly.
I agree. Let me hear what Brother Akko has to say. What's your 2 cents, Brother Akko?
Well, she struck a very important point, made a very important point about the process of decolonization. I've been speaking about that for a very, very long time. That we must be engaged in a process of decolonization. It is one of the criticisms I've made of our academic community in the Caribbean, who have a tendency to talk about post-colonialism, post-colonial and post-colonial. And I've always said we are neo-colonial. It's a new form of colonialism. We're not post-colonial anything, you know. So that's a very important point, that is a process we must engage. The other point she's made, which has been a general criticism of the emancipation process in Trinidad in particular, where people are Africans for a day. You know, they dress up on Emancipation Day, they have a good time. And after that, nothing happens. They go back to, you know, whatever they were doing. And it is even worse. And it's a point I've made previously. In Trinidad, our politics to a large extent is race-based, right? Outside of Tobago, I'm talking about the large island Trinidad. And for a lot of Africans in Trinidad, and this is not Tobago so much, a lot of Africans in Trinidad, being African is a political definition. They only are African when it comes to voting in an election because of the fear that an Indian party could win. So they'll tell you it's we party, that's Black party, the PNM, right? That's we thing. So they are Africans by political definition. As soon as the election's over and you ask them anything about the Africans, they say, well, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Baptist, I'm an Anglican. You understand? So being African is not a cultural phenomenon or cultural process. And I think this is one of the failures of the emancipation or organized structures or celebration as it now exists. That there is a need to do more, right, to encourage an African consciousness here on. The other criticism is too central. It is always in the city, you know, and it should be a nationwide observation, you know. And so those are some valid points she made relative to that process that we engage in every year. We have a nice march, we dress up in the fancies of clothing. I mean, you see some of the clothing, it is beautiful and fantastic, but after that, what? You know, the education system, at one point in time, the Haitian Revolution was taught at the secondary school level. I understood they took it off and they put it under something called resistance or something like that. But it is an attempt to diminish the teaching of a certain kind of history, you know. And in our school as an education system as a whole, our children don't even know the history of Trinidad and Tobago in any serious way. So we have a lot to do when we speak about emancipation in terms of how we view our education system, our politics, or even our judiciary, which is still steeped in this British tradition. You know what I mean? And yet it was ironic. I was looking at the mayor and all politicians talk nonsense, what the Indians call gobar, which is old crap, right? The headline was, if I remember, there is the meaning of a name, and they changed Columbus Square to, I think they want to change Columbus Square. They're moving the Columbus statue and they want to change Columbus. They moved the Columbus statue and they want to rename the square. But he's talking about renaming the square in Port of Spain. That's the capital city, Port of Spain. So here it is, you are engaging in symbolism on a minor issue, and then the major issue, which is what your capital city is named, Port of Spain, there is no attempt to even address that issue, that the capital of a sovereign republic is named after our former colonizer. And so what she said relative to emancipation, these are the things I think are important, right? Renaming some of those areas and streets that still have colonial names, renaming our cities, you know what I mean? That still have colonial names and represent the colonial figures. So these things are very important to me when you begin to talk about emancipation.
Big respect. One of the United Black Association for Development Educational Foundation, the organization that I lead in the interest of African people racialized as Black people in Belize, have taken up another campaign. Today is day 10 of that campaign. And our request is for the state to change the name of the holiday on August 1st from Emancipation Day to African People's Emancipation Day, regardless of what the rest of the Caribbean named it. Who was emancipated? To me, I think that's so important to name the people, and especially because our African ancestors and ancestors weren't considered human beings, even though they always were. They were seen as chattel, as property. So the same year that the state recognized August 1st as a public and bank holiday in 2021, they also recognized, I think it was October 12th. Now, for the indigenous people, the name of the holiday is Indigenous Peoples Resistance Day. It wasn't just Resistance Day. So similarly, because they understood the mindset of naming a people. So our campaign, I hope the rest of the Caribbean will join us, will be African People's Emancipation Day. It is a campaign that we have started on August 1st. We have to take one quick break. We'll come right back and continue more conversations about African people who are not emancipated, in Tobago particularly, but they're not just Tobago. We just have a Tobagonian historian, so that the context, but this would be applicable for all enslaved African people. Besides not being mentally free, we will never, like you don't say the physical shackles, but when you don't make that believes $5 minimum wage, when you're unable to provide for your family in a meaningful way, why do you think that happened? That happened because of what happened before August 1st, 1838. Everything in the past have to do with everything with how African people live now. Every single thing. But we'll have that conversation when we come back. Stay tuned.
Okay, sure.
Tired of replacing light bulbs? LEDs are what you need. LEDs last up to 30,000 hours. That's 30 times longer than incandescent bulbs, and up to 8 times longer than compact fluorescents. So less changing and less trash. Planet Earth thanks you. And the LED experts at Brothers Habet and Habet will help you find the best LED solution with colors for every room and mood, starting as low as $6.95. You can even get LED strips for home, office, and industrial use. So say goodbye to fluorescent tubes forever. And because they use up to 90% less energy, you save money. Money you can spend on other things. So head to Brothers Habet or Habet today. You can also call, email, or Facebook us. Have a brilliant day.
En Atlantic Bank, tu comodidad es nuestra prioridad. Nuestro centro de contacto está diseñado para mejorar tu experiencia bancaria. Con una amplia gama de opciones de servicio al cliente, ahorras tiempo y esfuerzo. Puedes llamar fácilmente para bloquear o desbloquear tus tarjetas de débito y crédito, realizar consultas de cuentas y acceder a información detallada de tus tarjetas. Ya sea que necesites asistencia con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales, nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m. en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte un servicio excepcional y las herramientas que necesitas para administrar tus finanzas de manera conveniente y segura. Aprovecha al máximo nuestro servicio del centro de contacto.
Atlantic Bank, building the future together.
In our world that's always changing, one thing stays the same.
Our promise as Smart Belize to keep you connected.
Connected to the moments, the people, and the future that matter most.
With every new tower, our service upgrades, and every new smile, we're keeping our promise in building more than a network.
We're building a future, a family, as Smart Belize. From Punta Gorda to Corozal, we are here not just as a network, but as your partner in progress.
We have grown significantly over the past 20 years, and we just keep growing. Thank you for placing your trust in us. We remain dedicated to providing meaningful connections that bring value in every way that matters to you. We continue to bring people together.
Tired of replacing light bulbs? LEDs are what you need. LEDs last up to 30,000 hours. That's 30 times longer than incandescent bulbs, and up to 8 times longer than compact fluorescents. So less changing and less trash. Planet Earth thanks you. And the LED experts at Brothers Habet and Habet will help you find the best LED solution with colors for every room and mood, starting as low as $6.95. You can even get LED strips for home, office, and industrial use. So say goodbye to fluorescent tubes forever. And because they use up to 90% less energy, you save money. Money you can spend on other things. So head to Brothers Habet or Habet today. You can also call, email, or Facebook us. Have a brilliant day.
Guatemala. This a the we have the nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots.
Welcome back to the final segment of Sunday Review, Sister YaYa, Sister Doc, Rita Pemberton, and Brother Ako. And you know how it goes sometimes during break, you have juicy conversations. And with the talk about African people never get emancipated. And that one different perspective from the mental enslavement. So Sister Doc, based on the conversation we had during the break, please make the connection between what happened in the past when we were enslaved, still relevant to enslavement today, especially when it comes to food and medicine. For sure that we were not, like we really buy into being emancipated people, into being free people. We're not. So make that connection from the past and the present, because you know, people ask me, what are the solution? What we could do now? We could have that conversation about, we'll call it, food and pharmacy in your yard?
Yes, yes. Well, the first element to real liberation is for people to take possession of their land. You see this selling out to these large enterprises. These hotels don't really bring as much money as people anticipate. They are costly to establish and maintain and operate, because the hotel not selling the kind of food that we want. It's what they want. So we are tied up there, right? So we've got to look at that. But I think there's a problem with the Caribbean perception of the Caribbean as a nice tourist place, and you have private beaches. That's a no-no. In my thing, if we are free, then the whole island is mine. You can tell me I can't go by this beach, but people are selling out or encouraged to sell out the land, or they need money to buy a car or something like that. If your grandfather labored how many years before he could get a piece of land, you are supposed to remain landed. Tobago, the enslaved people in Tobago at the end of the 19th century had a higher percentage of landowners than elsewhere. Squatting was never a feature of the history of Tobago by African people. There were white planters who squatted, but not by African people. And so independence was closely tied up with landowning. So we must keep that label, and we must hold on to our land. 1. 2, as far as pharmacy and cures went, there were people, herbalists, well, we call them herbalists. Now it usually was an older person who knew what to combine. We used to give ladies, after they delivered, their bath, and they used to have some leaves put in it to bathe the lady, and to include, to stimulate the outflow of postpartum matters, but now you have to go to a salon, you've got to pay, and the salon owner imports a lot of stuff that they put in there and make you feel refreshed, but the leaves works, and the salon something has the properties that the same leaves had, so we need to think and not just buy. I mean, we were into minge buying the latest, to be with it. To be with it is mean to hold on to your money and hold on to your property. That's how I see being with it, And so the whole notion of a pharmacy in your yard was traditional. That's not what they call it. But they grew the herbs that they would need if you have a cold or a fever or a sprained ankle or something, and we need to have that knowledge with us in every generation. You don't have to run to the doctor for everything. You go to the doctor, you do your regular test, and then you get a little sniffle that lasts a week or two, and you boil some bush and you take care of that. But that understanding is not there. The generation we have now, they go quickly to their bottle, but then some of them, those things are extremely expensive, and you could avoid that expense, so we have to get our young people, our population in schools into thinking beyond what is offered. I had to tell a group of people once, I said, what you see on TV, I want you to remember one thing. They are working. Those people on TV are working, they're earning a living as actors and actresses. So that's not how they live necessarily. So you don't follow that. So we have too many businesses built on following the fashion lead that comes from abroad. And the fashion lead is fashion and eating. And we have, we were told at one point, coconut oil is so bad for you. And suddenly now coconut oil is the best thing for you. In fact, you can get virgin coconut oil. My grandmother had a cup outside, and she grate a coconut and throw it in there and boil her oil and thing, and that thing, when they oil you down, your skin in good shape. But now, and so everything is directed to a market out there, not here. And we have to make better uses of our stuff. So we don't have to fall for the hype. The advertising pulse is very strong. It comes to you and tells you it's good for you, and it is presented in myriads of ways, not just take care of your health. You see it on TV, you see a show, you get a story, and at the end of it, what helped me so much was this or that or the other. So we have to let people understand that the world of the television is not always the real world. And it reinforces, this is the way the church was used during and after emancipation. you go to church and they tell you, oh, don't sing those songs, don't go to those wakes, don't do this, don't do that. And if you want your child to come to our school, then you cannot be seen being engaged in that drumming business that they don't like. Stuff like that, that we've got to move past all those things. So it is like growing your own food. What's wrong with that? Plants and seedlings are sold all over. You have a little space. Even if you don't have a big plot of land, you can do home gardening in a pot. There's some things you can grow for yourself that will cut down the cost of maintaining your family. And shoes, I don't know, Jordan shoes are popular, but I don't think Jordan needs any money. And you need your money to do some things, so you don't have to buy Jordan shoes to go to school and to feel like a person. This is the other thing. You feel like a person by those things you have, the clothes, the kind of clothes you wear. You get it from foreign, and that makes it good, and you're happy with that. But we have to make local, we have people making shoes locally, and those are good. They last you, and they're cheaper than importing. And with the forex problems which faces the entire Caribbean right now, you need to have more domestic industries providing the needs of the population. So food-wise, medicine-wise, health-wise, most of all, thinking-wise. That's what
Respect, Brother Ako. I think in the last segment you mentioned about people don't genuinely identify as African people. It's like an act, a performance. Culture is performative. It's not genuine. And so, indeed, we've had these conversations over and over again. But I think the way the world is moving now, one lot we want force, not because we want, like, for our own survival. One, not have the money, two, can't afford it, the high tariffs. So we want force to go back to planting just to eat. We want force to go back to using more, and in the Caribbean, people do use, it's not like we stop using it completely. But just because what it take for make we live, we don't have the money for these European cures. And if we say medicine, like sis say, that we say bush medicine, they can't repackage and give back to we with some chemicals in it. So I'd ask you, Brother Ako, in 2025, and we've had these talk shows and we've talked, but what will it take to make incremental steps towards African people, racialized as Black people, have the desire to find out who they are and the meaningful everyday choices and actions for decolonize ourselves?
So, YaYa, I don't think at this point in time we need incremental steps. I think we need radical change, extremely radical change. Given the advent of things like AI, artificial intelligence, right? And what this guy Yanis Varoufakis calls digital techno-feudalism, and another person uses the term digital colonization. We need radical change. And I'll tell you why. I was part of the Black Power movement in the 1970s, or in Trinidad. And it is only with that radical change that shook the foundations of the system to its core that we're able to get certain kind of changes. I don't know that given what modern capitalism and imperialism is, that they respect incremental changes. I think there has to be an assault on the citadel, to be honest with you, right? It's a word people don't like to use, but we have to begin to think in terms of a revolution. Now, I'm not talking about a revolution that is violent or, in that kind of way, but a revolution is that we radically change how we view the world. This point, Sister Dr. Pemberton make about coconut. I grew up in a coconut oil village. And I remember very clearly when the propaganda came out that coconut oil was bad. They brought some science and says it's had too much cholesterol and it's bad for your heart. Later on, what we found out, it was bogus science. The West wanted to sell what is called the northern oils, palm oil, not palm oil, soya oil and all of these other oils that they create. And so they got into their lab and create bogus science, which is propaganda, right? Got our leadership. One of the articles I couldn't read this morning for you was on breastfeeding. Because when I was part of the organization, the National Joint Action Committee, we launched a campaign in the 1970s to encourage women to breastfeed because Nestle was trying to sell them formula to move away from breastfeeding. And this is what they do all the time, right? Their objective, like slavery, was profit. And so they find other ways to sell you an idea of progress. Always at the end of it is profitability, right? And today, excuse me, the human body is the new thing for exploitation. As it was in slavery, when it was your labor, but now it's a human body. They have to sell you, they sell you bad food in the first place, and they make money off of that. When the bad food about to kill you, they send you to the doctor who give you bad medicine, right? They make you wear clothes that are inadequate for the climatic conditions. I look at these men in these suits and ties, wool suits that suited to the northern hemisphere. And how could, women in these tights that are suffocating your bodies, where the air not flowing through so that your skin gets, oxygen and so on. So we are the products, our bodies, right, are now the commodities that everybody sells something to. Our women and hair products, skin products, right? In parts of the Caribbean, people are lightening their skin, right? Because they want to look. In Jamaica, friends are telling me they saw somebody on TV this week, 2 years ago, looking dark. 3 years later, they're light skin. The classic case was the baseball player Sammy Sosa, right, from Jamaica, who was a black man, black. You look at Scummy, so you look like a freak out of some weird movie, right? So the human body is the new frontier of exploitation. I used to hear my grandfather used to say, if we're not careful, one day they're going to sell us water, which is free. Guess what? They are selling us water.
Water.
And the water is stripped of all the nutrients. I have a friend in who used to work at Coca-Cola. There's a chemical engineer. He said that have nothing in it. It is stripped of everything, right? River water, which is stones, you get minerals and as it goes through. So the human body is the new frontier of exploitation. And to facilitate that exploitation, they capture your mind. So they tell you what is yours is not good. What you look like is not good. And then they send these people, these European, one of the things you have to understand about European people, especially the women, they are very insecure in how they look. They're always trying to change something. There are mole, freckles on the skin. The brunette, they want to be blonde. And those insecurity, they pass it on to us as style. And now we are bought into that culturally, right, as style. And then the religious fraternity reinforces that. I mean, you look at these guys in these preachers in the $1,000 suits, right? What the basic line in the Bible, render your heart and not your garment, right? Where is that? You understand? As I told someone, they said Jesus chased the money chain of the temple. I said, if Jesus was alive today, he'll be doing drive-by whippings every Sunday at churches and whipping some of these pastors. Because the nonsense they tell people, right? And they are selling an idea through the so-called prosperity gospel.
Oh yes, everybody can
people, taking your hard-earned money, right? You can find 10 churches in one square. Like I know in my village in Guayagari, about 10 churches in a little 2-mile area. Guess what you don't have? You don't have one place to teach children to play music. You don't have one place for young men to gather, right, to discuss. Nothing at all. No institution that appeals to our social development or to appeal to and develop a sense of civic responsibility, which is what we had, right? And all of this now is now we are drained of all of this, what I call resource in terms of intellectual resource, cultural resource, and we are now imitating people who do not want us to around them. This is why they're passing all these immigration laws, and yet we are imitating these people who dislike us. You know, I looked at this thing recently about the passport citizenship by investment, right? When you enter the United States, right, as a visitor, and they still do it from what I still do. One of the things they ask you if you are communist, they ask you that.
Yeah.
We in the Caribbean, we have racist people, and we never ask these people, have you been involved in any racial profiling or discrimination? Like, we don't. So we inviting these people as and they could poison our water because some of them hate us. They could impact our services. And so we are not protecting ourselves from this, what I call this neo-colonial assault that is taking place, that is represented to a large extent by AI. And one of the things people don't understand about AI, which is a report that is now emerging, that AI, the machines, the data centers, they demand so much of water down that what is going to happen is that it's going to be a shortage of water in the world as these AI systems develop. You understand? And what has happened? We have no legislation. In fact, Belgium just did a legislation, or Denmark, allowing people to own their own image because AI can take your image, right, and utilize it for profit. So we are heading towards a kind of colonization, right, both in digital and what Varoufakis called a feudalism. Actually, he says beyond colonialism, he called it techno-feudalism. And if you know what feudalism is, you basically had no rights, no ownership of anything, right? And this is where AI is taking us. While our politicians talking race politics and class and caste and color discrimination. You know, one of the greatest lines I think Kalachurhan Stalin said, you know, in one of the cases, he says, sufferers don't care about race and class. No. You know, sufferers, you know, and at the end of it all, that is where more and more they are putting the vast majority of Caribbean people. So I think it's important that we develop new perspective, that we return to what Amilcar Cabral returned to our source and begin to look at how we can find ways within our own traditions. The famous CLR, James Lyon, when they asked CLR, you know, they said we had nothing, and CLR said, no, you are wrong. We had ourselves, right? Which is what Dr. Pemberton talked about in terms of the knowledge of herbs, right? My grandmother used to cup. I see that's a big thing now all in the NBA, people cupping. You have a little, what we call a bowlies, a little calabash. And
yes, so they put down.
Yes, and they will cup, right? They had things that if you fell, the little something in a black thing, they put in some water, give you to drink, they said to avoid clotting. All of these things we knew, right? It was indigenous knowledge. And we have moved away from this. And to some extent, we have discredited in an embrace of modernization, which has nothing to do with modernization. And that is what I think we have to understand. We can be modern, yet hold on to the things that work. Because if you hold on to the things that don't work, it is called irrelevant traditionalism. You understand? And all traditions that are irrelevant, we need to discuss them. All civilizations do that. But we throw away everything, the good and the bad, in a very twisted embrace of modernization. And that's what I have to say on that.
Big thanks, Brother Akko. We're on our final moment. Sister Doc, Rita Pemberton, final thoughts for this morning.
Well, we have a long road ahead of us, but we all need to be on board, and we all need to direct attention to how we can decolonize the minds of our young people and our leaders, our politicians, so that they implement the kind of policies that would put us ahead, that would bring about real liberation. Because until that happens, once we're tied up, we're tied up, and we are bound, leg, feet, hand, brain, And we need to liberate ourselves from that. It is doable as long as we put our minds to it.
Big thanks. It was an honor to have you this morning, sis. We have to have you back. Brother Ako, 1 minute.
Well, I would say this from ancient Kemet: seek after knowledge and treat her like a mother, for there is nothing so precious. We seem to have become disinterested in seeking knowledge. And I think what Dr. Pemberton shared with us this morning relative to our perspective on Tobago and emancipation was very important in our process of acquiring new knowledge. So I thank her for that, and I advise people to continue to seek knowledge. And in the words of our ancestors, treat her like a mother, for there's nothing so precious.
Big respect. Had a conversation this morning following the article that Sister Doc Rita Pemberton wrote in the Newsday for Trinidad and Tobago. The law did not emancipate Africans in Tobago. Our security guard this morning is Shane Flowers here not here because I did at my host. At XTV Studio, we have Technical Director Alexi Belial downstairs on the second floor, Creme Radio. We have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. And this show will repeat at 5:30 this evening. I want to thank everybody who tuned in on Facebook, XTV Belize, on YouTube, XTV Belize. Share the link. Here, Brother Ako say about knowledge. And it really matters to have people from other Caribbean regions, like Sister Doc Rita Pemberton, and share with from a historical perspective so we could understand how what happened in the past have everything to do with the quality of life we live today, especially African people, racialized as Black people. UEF has an ongoing campaign for the government of Belize to change August 1st date name from Emancipation Day to African People's Emancipation Day. And then we have to reach out to our sisters and brothers in the Caribbean and tell them we need to advocate for the government to do the same thing so that they name with people and that they represent we. So until next Sunday, again, thanks, Sister Doc. Thanks, Brother Ako. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Only the people and save the people.
Save the people. Thank you, Sister. Thank you, Dr. Pemberton. It's good to see you.
Thank you all for the invitation.
Big thanks.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master, talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love